in so many ways, social media has leveled the playing field where typically in media, it was only the mega churches that could even get in, that could afford the cameras or buy the airtime, to where social media now basically created this platform for any church to kind of begin to engage.
Hey, welcome to the Missional Marketing Podcast. I'm Bart Blair, joined by Jason Hamrock. We're so glad that you have tuned in to our show, and we've got a real treat for you today, don't we, Jason?
We do. I'm really excited for you to talk to this guy.
We just a couple of hours ago interviewed Nils Smith. Now, if you've been around the church space as a communications director or social media person, Nils is probably someone that you're familiar with. He has been on dozens of podcasts, has hosted a podcast, I think, for at least 10 years on church social media. And I learned a ton from Nils. Love his heart, love his perspective. Now, he still works in the church space, but he does a whole lot of other stuff as well. And most of which was more complicated than I can even begin to explain. But we just had a great conversation about how you as a church leader, as a communications director, can better leverage social media for ministry.
Yeah, Nils, he's a smart guy, and he's been doing this for a long time. And like you, church, I get in conversations with churches, and they're asking me like, hey, how do we improve our social media? Or even how do we start a social media, ministry? And Nils talks a little bit about, don't use social media, especially Facebook, as a marketing platform. Use it as a ministry platform. And so my recommendation, well, you're going to listen to a really good podcast here, but also a little extra juice for you is go to Facebook and join Church Communications. Go search that on Facebook, Church Communications. It's ran by Katie, who's a good friend of ours. And this group is 30,000 people deep, all of church staff. And if you pose a question like, what are some of the most powerful ways that you're using social media, you're going to get all kinds of answers from all kinds of different churches. It is a great resource for you. But I'm really excited about what our conversation turns into today. You're going to learn a lot.
Yeah, so make sure you listen to the end. One of the things that I asked Nils at the end to talk about was some things that he sees coming in the future for social media and for digital media for churches. And he kind of gives this sort of big picture of Web 3.0. And I'm not going to give away all of what he shares, but you recently had a podcast, an opportunity to be on a podcast, 95 Networks podcast with our friend Dale Sellers. And you guys were actually talking a little bit about some Web 3.0 stuff, right?
Well, a few weeks ago, a month ago, remember when Facebook made a little bit of an announcement? They're going to be called Meta. Mm-hmm. It's the Metaverse that they're talking about. Meta is all about virtual reality. And so, you can hop over to the 95 Network and listen to their podcasts. And I was on there. We talked about it because I got to tell you, I just got to let it out. Web 3.0, that's where ministry is going to be able to happen in virtual reality. And it's going there. So, we can say, I don't want to use that. I don't know anything about it. Well, you're going to, because it's just one of those things that it just comes down the pike, right? Everybody else learns about this stuff and the rest of culture is adapting to it. We need to go where people are, not expect them just to come into our building.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Dale Sellers and the 95 Network and their podcast. So I look forward to tuning into that episode. Not exactly sure when it's going to drop, but listening to two old guys talk about things on the internet, that's always really exciting. Okay, and enough of that. Hey, if you are a fan of our podcast, we hope that you have subscribed wherever you're consuming this content, whether that's on a podcast platform or on YouTube. Make sure that you subscribe. And leave us a rating and review. We would love to hear from you. If you have suggestions about how we can make the podcast better, or if you found an episode to be especially helpful for you, we would love the feedback on that because that helps us plan future content. So again, we thank you for tuning in. And without any further delay, here's our interview with Nils Smith. Hey, well, it's my pleasure to welcome to the show Nils Smith. Nils, thanks so much for hanging out with us today.
Thanks for having me. Thrilled to be here.
Yeah, so you're zooming in from New York City, and you've got a great story to tell in terms of your ministry and the work that you've been doing with churches. And you do a lot of work with other organizations and businesses that are not churches. But like we often do with our guests on the podcast, we like to start with just kind of hearing your story. So why don't you share your story with us? How did you end up where you are today doing what you do?
Yeah. So I think it's confusing, and I appreciate the introduction. What I do, because I am a little bit all over the place in different ways, but based here in New York City. I just, as to where I am, my primary job is with a company called Dunham & Company. I'm the chief strategist of social media and innovation for them, and helping the ministries they partner with get ahead of technology like social media and like virtual reality and cryptocurrency. And so I do a lot of consulting in that area. And then I have also run a social media marketing agency called Amplify Social Media, where I help ministries execute around social media, and then have some other fun virtual reality, initiatives and cryptocurrency projects that I'm working on the side. But I said that I got into that. My background started in this space in 1999. I was 19 years old, and I got my first job in ministry as a youth minister in Baytown, Texas, at St. Mark's United Methodist Church in Baytown, Texas. And my first Wednesday night youth group, we had 2 kids, and the 7th grade girl asked me what my aim was. And I told her my aim is to build a youth ministry to reach every teenager in Baytown, Texas. And she said, "No, what's your aim?" And I said, "I just told you." And she said, "What's your AOL Instant Messenger?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "You take that CD, you connect to the World Wide Web, and all my friends are on this internet, and you can come hang out with us." And so I went and hung out where the teenagers were, as a youth minister should, and figured out what AIM was. And I was Nils BYX, and we ended up, I saw a dozen kids accept Christ in the chat room that summer, and I saw more than a dozen accept Christ in our youth group, as we grew from 2 to 40 in our Wednesday night youth group, primarily because of I went to where they were on the internet and on social media, and that led to incredible ministry fruits. And so for me, I was an accidental social media, marketer for ministry purposes. And then that led to, I did youth ministry for a decade and leaned into MySpace, and then this new website, Facebook.com, came along, and we started onlinechurch.com about a decade ago on the back of Facebook. And I've just had the privilege of, leaning in early, but really with ministry goals aligned to the technology of social media to accomplish those goals, and seen some incredible fruits throughout the years. And that's led to business developments and things like that. But at the core, it's to accomplish ministry goals. And so that's been the journey.
Yeah. So that's important. Yeah, I when I hear you say that, that's exciting. By the way, I love that little story. That's so cool. Way to go, God. A lot of churches we talk with, a lot of them are small, right? I just got off a podcast with the 95 network. It's a network that reaches 95% of the churches, which are small churches, right? And most of those churches are like, why should we do social media? We don't know about it. We don't know how, but speaking of that, why is it important for churches to even utilize, or how to utilize, social media?
I think there's a lot of reasons. My dad pastors a church outside of Houston, Texas, of about 100 people, maybe 120 people. And so it's fascinating having conversations with him of how is he using Facebook, and how is he using Instagram and Twitter, or he's picking my brain because a lot of my work is with mega churches and some large ministries, and sometimes comparisons can be difficult for smaller churches that don't have quite the same resources. But the reality is that in so many ways, social media has leveled the playing field, where typically in media, it was only the mega churches that could even get in, that could afford the cameras or buy the airtime, to where social media now basically created this platform for any church to kind of begin to engage communities where they are. A church that I do a lot of work with now is Transformation Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma. They were a church plant just 6 years ago, and they leaned into YouTube and Instagram. And now they're a church of, they reach over 1 million people a week without spending any money, without buying any TV and airtime. They literally just have a camera and they stream to the internet. and the possibilities. This is a 6-year-old church. And so I think any church can basically go anywhere now with social media. But the reality is, even my dad's church of 100 people that are predominantly an older congregation, they're spending an average of 2 hours a day. The average American spends 2 hours a day on social media. Whether that's unhealthy or not, that's where they are. And I think that it's, I think God calls us to go to where people are, to reach people. And sometimes that's for evangelistic purposes, but I think social media allows for fellowship opportunities throughout the week. I think it allows for discipleship opportunities. I think it allows for missional engagement in a very significant way. So I think the bottom line is, if people are there, we should probably prioritize those opportunities.
So what's that been like in the last 18 months? How's that changed?
A couple of things have changed with the internet, and I think one of the things that the technology, from my perspective, especially from a social media standpoint, is video conferencing. I think while Skype has been around for a long time, but people would use it here or there when they had to. Yeah. I think people realize, though, like it's significant. While we're doing this call, we can see each other's facial expressions. We can interact in a way beyond if we were just recording audio. It's not the same as if we were in the room. And I think we can own that and accept that. But the reality is, for me to get on an airplane and fly to you in Arizona, or to Bart in Texas, in New York, that's going to take me days. That's going to be, it's exhausting. We can have a very real personal interaction here through social media. And I think what we found too, we're in a small group at our church. We have young kids, and all the other families in there have young kids. That means we probably skipped every other week because we had a sick child, or we had a meltdown, or it was hard for us to have. We had about 100% attendance for almost a year in our small group because Zoom didn't go down. Zoom was always there, and if our kids were sick, then they could go in their rooms and be sick. And so it actually technology has enhanced and created opportunities for interactions that aren't just, some people see technology as, okay, we can go global with this. It actually creates opportunities for local engagement to happen throughout the week that we often prioritize. It had to be in person. Well, sometimes some of those connections can be digital too, even when they're on the local context.
Yeah.
I want to just drill down on something that you said just a minute ago, kind of rewind a little bit. You said that social media has kind of leveled the playing field, big churches, small churches. In one of our recent episodes, we interviewed Daryl Girardier, who's the communications director at Brentwood Baptist. And he made a statement that kind of became sort of the through line for a lot of our conversation, which was that one of the biggest mistakes that churches make on social media is by looking at other churches and just imitating what they're doing. And I think that it was a very astute statement, because I see like a lot of small churches simply trying to imitate what they see the larger churches doing. And to Daryl's point, it was without really understanding what their purpose was behind doing what they were doing. So you said that you work with a lot of larger churches. Your dad pastors a smaller church, and I'm sure that you interface with smaller churches as well. What are some of the things that if you were working with or coaching smaller churches, how would you coach them to develop their own voice for social media, or to find their own way, rather than simply looking at what Elevation Church is doing and trying to imitate that?
Sure. There's a lot of thoughts here, and I think Elevation is a great example of. There's so many churches that are like, can you just help me be Elevation? And I'm like, let's be realistic. Elevation has like 20 staff people just focused on this content development, and they're running, probably hundreds of $1,000s worth of ads. It's not a realistic comparison. Now, that said, with Transformation Church, Mike Todd was editing all of his sermons on iMovie on his computer up until 18 months ago. And so I've seen basically a smaller church still have that kind of impact, and with a pastor that leaned in. But I also still think that's an exception. And Pastor Mike is a unique, just leader from a understanding media context. But I think that it's the biggest shift that I see where ministries begin to move the needle on social media. And this has been the last 10 years. This isn't a new development. but it's when ministries decide that they're going to use social media for ministry and not marketing. And so the thing that I see churches doing is they're like, oh, this is another place to give our announcements. And the reality is if we so is your Sunday service. But if your Sunday service was 90% announcements and 10% sermon, nobody would come to your service anymore, or they would come 90 minutes late and skip the announcements and hear the message. People need to hear your announcements, but they're really connecting to your church because they need to be ministered to and they want to connect with other believers. And announcements are a part of how they get engaged and connected in your community, but you can't lead with that. I think you lead with ministry, and then you share the information that people need. And I think making that shift. So even if it's just a text-based, we're going to push a Bible verse every day, that's significant ministry that we know the word of God can transform people's lives. And so maybe it's not a fancy video. It's just something you copy off of YouVersion and you post to your social media accounts. So I think it's really taking that shift of how can we do ministry on these platforms first and then market, and that shift alone, just a mindset shift is and I said that and pull back, you're creating great social media content every Sunday when you're creating your sermon. And so that gives you such a great foundation of just taking that work you've already done it as a pastor and applying and basically repurposing that. And it doesn't have to be fancy videos like Stephen Furtick either. It could be text quotes. It can be, just very simple, or just the scripture passages right out of your message. So it doesn't have to be complicated.
Wow. You're planting a lot of digital seeds in that.
100%.
And you're singing our song. Our song is, hey, Pastor, you spent a ton of time studying, writing, preparing, and delivering a sermon on Sunday. Let's take that and extrapolate as much content out of it as we can to help it live on between the Sundays, beyond the Sunday. So that is right up our alley. I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in to the Missional Marketing Podcast. It's always our goal to help you as a church leader leverage your communications and digital media resources to reach more people for Jesus. One of the ways that we help churches do that is through creating social media content from your Sunday sermon videos. Specifically, what we can do for you is to create short sermon snippets from 30 seconds long to 5 minutes long, capturing those mic drop moments that you really want people to remember. We edit the videos, add captions, add your church branding, and then you or we post them to your social media channels. As a pastor, I always love to see my sermon content live on beyond the Sundays, and I know that's what you value for your sermons too. We offer this service as a monthly subscription, but we've got a 6-week trial that gives you a chance to see how it works. If you'd like more information, just shoot me an email at bblair@missionalmarketing.com. I'd be glad to meet with you, explain the process, and answer any questions that you have. Once again, thanks for tuning into our podcast. Let's get back to the interview. You may have just answered the next question that I'm going to ask you here, but if there's one thing that you could get every church communications leader or every church to stop doing with their social media, what's one thing that you would have them stop doing?
I think, and I think I spoke to that of stop making it a marketing platform first, but I'll add to this of a big mistake that I see church leaders engaging in that I'd love to see them stop doing is just engaging in debate on social media, and even allowing unhealthy debate on their social media platforms. I've yet to see a fruitful debate on a church Facebook page or Instagram account. It's unhealthy for the most part, and those kind of conversations either need to be moved to a private platform or an in-person interaction or Zoom call. But a text thread on a Facebook page that's owned by the church is so unhealthy, and it happens so much. And a lot of times it's somebody negative in the community that has a bad perception of a church, and then church members start backing up the church, and then they get into debate with community member. It just is unhealthy. It's not good for your community. It's not good for your church. And I'd squash those kind of debates on your social media channels.
Okay, so what's one thing you have them start doing?
Start doing is I think just what's one way that you can minister or inspire your congregation or your community today. And I think just thinking about that, if you just took 5 minutes of what's a word that I want to share. What's a Bible verse? What's a message? And the truth is, I say you don't have to do video. You've got a great camera in your pocket. And if you don't, you can get one for like $50. You know, a cheap, my kids have these cheap Android phones that are like $50. The videos they create, you know, my 12-year-old, what she can create with a cheap Android phone is amazing. You've got a video camera that you can use on a low budget. I feel like that excuse is out the window of what's a way you can inspire, minister, even just say a prayer for your congregation. That I would say the other thing that at Community Bible Church, we learned this, and I continue to see it be very effective, is every Wednesday we used to just post the exact same post. How can we pray for you today? And that was it. It was the exact same post. It was not text, no graphic. And the engagement we would get and we would respond to every single one. But really what was happening is the community itself was responding and praying for each other. And it just created this just prayer wall every Wednesday. That was our rhythm. That could be Monday, that could be today. But just how can you minister to your congregation today? And don't take more than 10 minutes. Give yourself 10 minutes and do it in the next 10 minutes. I think you'll be surprised how fruitful that 10-minute investment will be into the life of your congregation.
Wow. Hey, Jason, that reminds me of something. And I think it was you during COVID, you were connected with or talking to, I think if I get my facts straight, it was a small church or a church plant out in California where the pastor was actually using Facebook Live to do prayer, to take prayer requests, and was actually praying. Do you remember having that conversation?
Yeah, what he did was he actually ran a little paid campaign, spent a little bit of money, would do it every day. We're talking like $10. And he would, his thing was, we want to pray for you right now. And so he would get on Facebook a chat going on with somebody who would say, here's my prayer request. He and his wife would record that prayer and send it to the person.
Wow.
And he goes, we would do 10 to 15 a day. We wouldn't do it every day because we just didn't have the time, but we do 10 to 15 on a session. And he goes, that was the best way we grew our church, because people are like, now what church are you with? And they just had this conversation. And sure enough, those people would show up on Sunday saying, thank you so much for the prayer. And that, I was blown away by that. This little tiny church was exploding.
Yes.
Yeah. That's pretty interesting. It's pretty interesting.
It's incredible. Yeah. Power of prayer. Yeah.
So Nils, I'm going to ask you to kind of be a prophet here. You've been in the social media space, since the AOL AIM days, and I'm sure you had a MySpace account and the whole 9 yards. What do you see the role of social media becoming? How do you see the role of social media impacting the ministry of the local church in the upcoming years? We've just come through a significant shift in the last 18, 20 months where churches have realized church online is no longer really an option. It has to be in some capacity a function of what we do. I heard someone say recently, you reminded me of this in the early part of our conversation today, but I heard someone say recently that, the harvest is plentiful, but the church is not online. And you said, as you were sharing your story earlier, that you went where people are, and we know people are on social media. So what are some of the things that you look forward to? Some of the things that you think we might see in social media as churches leverage it for more gospel-centered conversations and more evangelistic outreach in the future?
Yes, that's a great question. There are, I'm in a lot of research right now around blockchain technology, and we're actually, I believe, in a significant internet shift of what was AOL, was essentially perceived to be Web 1.0, where it was the information superhighway. What then became Web 2.0, which was social media, mobile technology, and high-speed internet, which allowed for live streaming and mass media through social media. Web 3.0 is really interesting. We're seeing a shift now in Facebook changing there into Meta, with a lot of the conversation around the Metaverse and what that looks like in virtual reality, what it looks like with blockchain technology, with decentralization, or we'll hear terms like interoperable, where Google and Facebook and Apple, they don't play very well together,
Right.
today.
Right.
But in the metaverse, they have to. Now, it's unclear where this is going. Who could have predicted when we were in Web 1.0, where would that Web 2.0 would have looked like this? And I think when we would even see it, if you remember what the conversations about social media were like, it's like, that's dumb. These teenagers are wasting so much time on this dumb site where now who's the biggest audience on Facebook? It's old people, right? And they're spending, like hours. I would assume that now those over 60 are spending more time than those under 20 on social media in many cases. And so we've seen this kind of mass adoption now. So where this is going, what seems weird of putting on a virtual reality headset is I think becoming more commonplace with things like, working from home and doing things, and going places in virtual reality, virtual experiences, or video conferencing. So it's hard to say where so much of this is going. But I do think virtual reality is going to be a bigger part of our future.
Yeah.
I think 360 video is probably going to be one of the entry points into that. So I think what you'll see is churches beginning to live stream, where right now it's a rectangular, of what we stream, where 360 video allows us to basically create an immersive video environment that you can consume through a VR headset. I think that's a big deal. I think that I think cryptocurrency is a big part of our future. I think right now, I heard somebody say the other day of, if you want to undercut the church, just cut their credit card processor, and they're dead. That liability is more significant, I think, than people realize. I think blockchain technology, cryptocurrency will actually allow for better exchange within churches and giving that's a little less controlled. So there's some interesting layers to where some technology is going. Bottom line, though, is if I were to think maybe even 2 to 3 years, digital advertising, I think, is the biggest opportunity today, and will be for the next 3 years. I think churches, when I started at online Community Bible Church 10 years ago, we grew our page to 800,000 organically because we were early. Well, today it's unlikely, maybe on TikTok, but it's unlikely that you're going to see that kind of organic growth. Digital advertising allows us to target people in such a localized way. I think Nextdoor is one of the most underutilized platforms from a digital advertising perspective. So I think digital advertising, when it comes to social media, we focus so much on organic engagement, paying just like that pastor did of $10 a day. We've always paid. Most churches have paid money through yellow page ads, back in the day, or little billboards or signage. So spending some money on digital advertising is just a smart use of where social media technology is. And then I think prioritizing social media for discipleship and fellowship opportunities is really where I think we can see more development. I think pastors saw it from an evangelism perspective initially, and I think it's really beginning to see the community aspect. And the platform that I'll kind of speak to is Discord. I think Discord is going to be one of the more significant ministry tools out there in the next 3 to 5 years, because it's really built around community and engagement and learning. And I think so much of what we have to share is these current platforms are very micro media content distribution platforms, where I think we've actually moved away from the social aspect of social media. And I think Discord is really going to bring that fellowship, discipleship tool to social media here in the next 3 to 5 years. So those are the things I'll throw out. There's so many different paths. So who knows?
I think virtual reality is going to be here before you know it. I mean, our church is already experimenting with it.
Nice.
And I think, and so my plea to churches is, don't sit on this, right? You can't be the last one to the table when it comes to these changes. And the church, Big C Church, is so historically so far behind, and we can't let that happen. And so, because it's like this stuff changes like this. And if you're not staying up to it, you're going to be left behind. And we can't allow that to happen, church, right? So I totally agree with you on that, where virtual reality is going to make things so much easier to engage with. And people are hungry for it. They really are. You know, we're seeing a lot of churches we talk with, a lot of people are showing up to church for the first time.
Yeah.
I can't explain it. I don't know why, but they're like, we got new people coming.
Yeah.
You know, and they're hungry for answers. And I'm going, oh wait, God's up to something cool. We need to understand and adapt to that.
Yep. I love it.
Nils, I'm gonna back up. We have a couple more minutes left here, and so I just want you to explain something to me. Okay. Discord. I hear people talking about it. I don't know. I follow the guys over at Black Bar. I don't know if you're connected with those guys, you follow them. A great YouTube channel and do a lot of church communication stuff, but they talk all the time about their Discord. And I'm like, I have no idea what this Discord thing is. And I was talking to a youth pastor at a church a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about his Discord. For the uninitiated and the old ignorant people like me, can you just give us a brief rundown of what Discord is?
Yeah, it's a great question. So Discord is very similar to Slack. If you've used Slack at all for business, and it's essentially, you've got an app or a web portal, but it's basically chat threads. And so you can choose to be a part of different chat threads. But, one of the things I really value about Discord is it has, they built in a lot of the audio functionality of Clubhouse and some of that engagement, those engagement pieces. The reason I think Discord is very popular in the gaming community. Even if you look at their app currently, it's a little game like controller that's a part of it. It's very popular in the virtual reality, kind of in the technology, cryptocurrency communities. So it's kind of a geek platform today. But honestly, that's how Twitter started. That's how a lot of early social media, develops. Is in some ways, while the technology is being built out, the technologists are, pioneering how it's used. But then it develops out towards the masses and mass engagement. And so that's where I perceive that it's going. Now, it might not be Discord. It might be another platform that comes along, or Twitter might copy it, or Facebook might buy it, or who knows where this will go. I just believe that I think it's the community aspect of conversations that people are hungry for. And I think to the side of Zoom, I think that's been interesting is there's a lot of people that actually don't want to be seen all the time. They want to be heard and they want to interact, but they like that audio side and they like that chat side, and being involved in some community in that way. So but Discord it's an interesting platform. It's not real user friendly yet. It's a little complicated for new users to use. It gets a little cluttered. And so that's where I think a year from now, it's going to be a lot more common. But I'm seeing here in New York, they're investing a lot of money in subway ads. And so all over the subways now, you see Discord banners and signs. And so that tells me they're really looking to kind of move it to the masses from a marketing standpoint.
Wow.
Either that or they're marketing it to Facebook, so Facebook will buy it.
Yeah, maybe so.
If I'm a betting man, I'm sure that there have been some conversations at Facebook headquarters about what they're going to do with Discord.
Or copy it seems to be Facebook's path in recent years. Yeah.
Hey, as we wrap things up here, Nils, I want to say again, we really appreciate you taking the time with us. Just kind of on a side note, is there anything that you wished we would have asked you today that we didn't ask you about? Anything that you're like, hey, this is my soapbox these days and I really want to be on it?
I don't have a soapbox, but I would say the thing that I am just geeking out over right now is blockchain technology, cryptocurrency. I think that I think it's in NFTs. I think that technology pathway even is probably more significant than virtual reality in my mind. I think it's a significant shift in the internet. And I think that, I think every church should be taking cryptocurrency. If you're not yet accepting cryptocurrency, I had a church work with the other day, got $1 million gift in Bitcoin. And I think it's changing. The internet is changing. And so that's why my soapbox right now is pay attention to blockchain, even if it's confusing. We don't understand. The truth is, most people don't understand how the internet works still. We just know that we get on it and it's amazing and it improves our lives. You don't need to understand blockchain technology and decentralization. I think what you need to understand is that it's changing, and understanding what it's changing and how it's changing those things. And right now it's changing money, but it's going to be changing media, and it's going to be changing a lot of different aspects, and it's changing ownership. And so the NFT side is, I think, going to be interesting in the near future as well. So yeah, that's my soapbox right now.
Okay, that's good enough. Hey, if any of our listeners or viewers want to connect with you, have questions, maybe they're curious about, what you're doing with businesses and this whole cryptocurrency blockchain stuff, how can they connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm on social media everywhere. So at Nils Smith, Nils Smith, and then LinkedIn is where I'm probably spending the most time right now in content distribution, engagement, and talking about blockchain stuff a lot. So yeah, I'd love to connect on wherever you are on social media, but LinkedIn is where I'm hanging out the most these days.
Right on.
That is where I connected with you, and we will link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes of this episode. Nils Smith, thanks again for taking the time with us today.
Thank you.